Okay, camera's going to flip over to me in a second. Hi. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for coming to our final Friday forum of 2023. My name is Laura Swanzarek. I'm the advocacy manager at Downtown on the Go. We're a local nonprofit doing transportation advocacy in Tacoma to try to make it easier to walk, bike, and use transit. We're really excited to offer these forums in a hybrid format. It's nice to have some folks in the room with us and to have all of our panelists here all together. That's really great. And of course, everyone on Zoom, we appreciate you too. For those of you who are online, I want to let you know there is an automated closed captioning available on Zoom. If you press the CC button or view closed captions, you can turn that on. So for our 2023 forum series, we're inviting Tacomans to imagine what the future of Tacoma could be as we dive into the rising community concerns of housing, traffic violence, and climate resilience. Today is our last forum of the year. We'll be discussing the intersection of climate and mobility. There will be a Q&A section at the end. For folks in the room, you can bring your written questions to me at the table, and I'll get those to Tanisha. For folks on Zoom, please use the Q&A function. You can submit questions at any time during the forum. You don't have to wait until the end. I want to give a big thank you to our partners, Metro Parks Tacoma and Pierce Transit, for making a hybrid format for these forums possible, and to our 2023 forum sponsor, Parametrics, for helping us to put on these conversations. Now, I want to introduce our amazing moderator, Tanisha Jumper. She's been our moderator for a long time now, and she really is what brings these forums together. We're so glad to have her with us in moderating these conversations. So Tanisha, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. And just like I say, every forum, the conversation goes really quick, but so does the series. So it feels like I'm always sad at the last one because I'm like, oh, I don't get to do this again for, 9 more months. But thank you all for coming. Thanks for the people who tune in every Friday for the first 3 months of the year. And thanks to all the panelists, the ones that are with us today and the ones that have been with us through the series that have made these conversations really rich and full. And today we have a amazing panel. I'm super excited for you to hear all the things that we got to talk about in our pre-conversation. I'm going to try my best to keep us on time to get to your questions. You guys always have great questions, and I can never get to as many as I like. For the people online, I do monitor the chat as we go through. And so if I see questions or if I, see things that I can get someone to elaborate on in real time, I try to do that. So sometimes, I don't ask your question at the end. But again, I'm really excited for you to meet this panel. And so with no further ado, I am going to ask them to introduce themselves and just share a little bit about, where they come from, and then we'll jump into the questions. And so I'm going to ask my good friend, Chrissy, to introduce herself.
Thanks, Tanisha. My name is Chrissy Cooley. I'm the executive director of the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency. I've worked in sustainability for almost 20 years, always doing climate planning, and then in universities, and then I jumped to implementation, more on the ground climate implementation work in conservation and then public health. I was also on the board of Tacoma Public Utilities when at the time they did the transportation electrification plan. So I feel really well suited to be at the Clean Air Agency at this time with so many opportunities coming up around mobility. And I'm just really excited to be here today.
Good afternoon. My name is Evlondo Cooper. I'm a member of the Sustainable Tacoma Commission, and I write about climate, energy, and environmental justice for a national nonprofit organization. My connection to sustainability and mobility is driven by the desire to create a more just and sustainable future and to ensure that everyone has the resources they need to lead healthy and full lives. My interest stems from my personal experiences living in New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina, and witnessing the devastation and displacement caused by the storm and the way it disproportionately impacted low-income and minority communities helped me realize the urgency of climate and environmental justice issues. And I'm looking forward to that conversation this afternoon. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is iLeana, she, her pronouns. I am here as a resident of District 5 in South Tacoma, and I am advocate for climate change and active transportation. I am the first member of the Tacoma Climate Leadership Cohort hosted by the Tacoma Tree Foundation. And there I was learning the skills to become an advocate for climate change. As well, I am a volunteer for the Tacoma Tree Foundation, and they are focusing on increasing urban canopy in the Tacoma Mall area, just because it's really low and compared to other parts of the city. As well, until 2025, I am a voting member for the Bicycle Pedestrian and Technical Advisory Group. And basically what I do there is to inform city staff about how can we make easy and safe active transportation in South Tacoma. That's the area where I live. I'm really happy to be here to continue to have a conversation about how to make Tacoma more sustainable and climate resilient.
Thank you. Told you we have a really great panel today. So, Chrissy, I'm going to start with you. What are the ways that you see sustainability and mobility connected?
If you've met me once, I've probably told you that I think that sustainability is the balance of equity, environment, and the economy. And mobility is in every one of those three pillars. Like, you cannot have good quality of life and access to a good quality of life, i.e. justice, if you don't have good transit options and the ability to get around in your community. When you're talking about the environment, the transportation sector is 40% of our greenhouse gas emissions. So if we're not in this region, so if we're not addressing that, we're not talking about the environment. And then transportation is the way we move our goods. And that's such a big cost, especially in this time with inflation, and has so much to do with how businesses' operations work. If you're not talking about mobility, you can't be talking about any of the 3 E's. So it's hugely intersectional, and I think it's at the root of a lot of environmental justice concerns.
Thank you. Evlondo, how do you connect the two in your work?
Yeah, piggybacking off a little bit of what Chrissy said. To me, one of the key connections is reducing greenhouse gases. And like she mentioned, transportation is a major factor to greenhouse gas emissions within the city, primarily through the use of cars and trucks. So we're working to promote sustainable mobility options such as increased public transit, the use of EVs or electric vehicles that can help Tacoma reduce its carbon footprint and meet its climate action goals. Another key component is social equity. Access to sustainable transportation options can have a significant improvement on people's lives, particularly in low-income and marginalized communities. I also live in South Tacoma, and as a newer resident to Tacoma, I can see how redlining and inequitable infrastructure cited in certain areas has really contributed to a lower quality of life for certain communities in the city. So I think we need to work on improving that. Communities of color generally and in Tacoma have a disproportionate or exposed to disproportionate levels of pollution and have faced barriers to sustainable transportation options, which also limits their housing, transportation, and quality of life access. So I think we should look at other cities that are similar in size to Tacoma and see some solutions that they've implemented, and also work within our community and ensure that we're including all communities, especially those historically marginalized, in these conversations about what equity should look like. What sustainability and mobility should look like in their areas as well.
Yeah, thank you. iLeana, want to jump in?
Absolutely. I'm going to tap in my personal experience. I grew up in a city for 22 years where active transportation and different modes of transportation was the default, and the city was not developed around being car-centric, or the infrastructure was not developed around automobile. And then when I came to United States as an immigrant, I realized that everything was developed not to the human scale. Everything was developed to the car scale. And I started seeing that creates so many barriers on how to navigate the city and how you can meet your basic needs like food, healthcare, and a little bit of adventuring in your neighborhood and meeting your neighbors casually. So I think that the connection between those two is, in my mind, can we imagine a Tacoma where every single neighborhood is a complete neighborhood? And what I mean by that is that we can buy food or by active transportation, meet our basic needs without depending on a car. We need cars because we know that having a city that have different modes of transportation will be more accessible for those who need it, but not for every single need. So that is the connection between sustainability and mobility is basically on we need to think that the changes that we are doing is not for our generation, it's for the young people who deserves cities where we can reduce automobile carbon emissions, where we make active transportation effective and easy to use, and where the neighborhood is actually at a human scale. And I think that if we kind of think about those two phases, we can reduce emissions, then adapt to climate change, then create a more vibrant, sustainable city.
So I'm going to stay with you for a second because I think you were talking about, sustainability and the connectedness of a community, and we're going to talk about how does transportation and sustainability affect a thriving community. But I also think that one of the key points is that, so I have children in their 20s, and my children can't afford, like I have one who has opted just not to have a car because that is an additional $600-700 of monthly bills that she can't afford, and then try to afford housing. And so with we don't have a lot of things in place to control the cost of housing. So more and more people are going to opt out of having a car. And like electric vehicles are great, but you have to have a certain amount of money to have an electric vehicle, then to have a charging port. And so, just thinking about all those things, I'd like you to elaborate a little bit just on how, you talked about when we did our pre-meeting about how in your community you could get around, you could meet your neighbors, and like, what is maybe the unintended consequences of having a car infrastructure built around cars and what that does to a community?
Well, first of all, financially, it's a huge responsibility. In my personal experience, my car is constantly putting in danger my savings for other things that can bring more quality to my life. Talking about people of color and people who are low income, a car is becoming a high barrier for jobs and access and opportunities. So right now we are thinking about a community where they need to think about, where do I live? Or can I afford a car to access certain things? So those decisions really will keep impacting people of color and people that are low income. And when I was living in a city where I was not needing a car at all, I think I feel more connected. I feel more safe because I know who was around by just like seeing people walking the same streets. And I particularly think that a car is a very isolated infrastructure. So it's not only expensive, it's a huge responsibility. It also emits most of the carbon dioxide, and then keeps people of low income making huge sacrifices to access opportunity. So it's like a vicious cycle to continue centering everything around the car. That was a couple generations. We understand the industrial way to develop our cities, but we need to imagine something different.
Yeah, go ahead.
And sharing a personal anecdote, I mean, living in New Orleans during Katrina, it took me a while before I realized, and there was data on this, that when you talk about climate resilient cities, it cannot be a car-centric city. Most of the people that were left behind in New Orleans that were stuck in the Superdome and stuck in the city did not have a car. We're talking about a poor city where 40% of the people didn't own a vehicle. So they weren't able to evacuate in the midst of an extreme weather event where they needed to evacuate. And then moving to Chicago after that, and Washington, D.C., and never using the car All right, well, this is a totally different way that we can live. And I know it's very challenging to restructure a city that is built that is very car centric, but to me, that's why I taught the benefits of mass transportation so much, where, no matter where you live, you are connected to the city. You have walkable neighborhoods that have resources, grocery stores. We have to think very holistically about how we approach this, because it's not just transportation and mobility. It's also how we, like I said, how you structure our neighborhoods.
It goes to, the connectedness. It also goes to like your ability to age in place. It goes to your ability to like buy a house in a city. And then, if you get to the point where you want to have children, do you have to then move somewhere else because, the city is overbuilt for single young people? Or do you have to, then you're an older person and now you need to stop driving for whatever reasons. Now, can you not get anywhere?
Yeah.
And now you live so far out, you can't drive. Now you can't get to your doctor and so there's all of these things that I feel like are both and that sometimes feel like they're in conflict with each other. They don't really have to be if we reimagine it. They do if we're trying to like tweak and fix. And some things are beyond tweaks and fix. Like, you can like refix your stove or your refrigerator. And at some point you're like, okay, this has cost me more than just buying a new refrigerator. I think like in some of our infrastructure and kind of creation of our cities, we're at that point where it's like, it's beyond just like a little tweak that we have to really go there. Chrissy, you want to talk? I know you guys did a lot of work when you were on the TPU board around electric vehicles and trying to make some of those things more affordable, but like what's your connection? Like, how are these things connected and how do you increase at the end of the day, all this comes to quality of life, right?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter whether you have it or don't have it. Like, if people can't thrive in your community, then none of it's worth it. So like, how do these things all tie together for a community?
You did a great job describing the tension, but that tension is everywhere. Like, the highest cancer risk in this region is from diesel particulate matter. It's the I-5 corridor. That is the biggest risk to human health. And if you're going to incentivize people to move from like a regular gasoline powered single occupied vehicle to an electric, the people that are most likely to make that switch are the people that are a little bit higher up on the income scale. So where's the cost benefit in offering those incentives to get the health benefits for the communities, often redline communities that are stuck breathing that nasty air in next to the I-5 corridor, but they're not the ones getting the direct incentives. So there's a lot of tension at Tacoma Public Utilities. The Transportation Electrification Plan did a lot of research on how to specifically support lower incomes to people living on a lower income to be able to benefit from some of the electric vehicle transportation options out there. But there's a lot of work to go. It's not an empowering story, but at the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency, we tried to do a car sharing, an EV car share, and we ultimately couldn't get there because of insurance reasons. So people are trying, but it's tough, and we're going to need a lot of people trying and a lot of experiments to see which ones stick.
Yeah. So what policies or actions would you like to see in our community to really get us closer to that? And I think I'm going to throw you a little bit of a curveball, but just like in the conversation we're just talking about, like, what are the conversations that need to be had, right now, to help us get there? So Evlondo, I'm going to start with you. Like, what are some of the policies or conversations that we need to be having right now?
So many of these were included in Tacoma's Climate Action Plan. We just need to get support and funding for many of them.
Shout out to Chrissy.
So the plan is the goal is to get greenhouse gas emissions down by 50% by 2030. And so we should be encouraging alternative modes of transportation, including biking, walking, and public transit, encouraging the use of electric or hybrid vehicles. There's a lot of tension in the environmental space about, how much can EVs actually do? But I think thinking as part of a holistic plan, they have to have some kind of a role, because some people don't want to give up cars, even if there was all the public transportation in the world. So they have to be part of the mix, but I do think we should prioritize public and mass transportation. We need to support transit-oriented development in addition to affordable living, affordable homes, expanding transit service and the frequency of service. We need to encourage carpooling and ride sharing. We need to create neighborhoods that are, again, communities where people feel comfortable walking. There's a controversial idea called 15-minute cities. There's a lot of misinformation about it. But to my mind, the basic idea is that you have the resources you need, grocery stores, parks, things that improve your quality of life within a 15-minute walk of your home. And that's not an idea that can be replicated everywhere, but it should be the way we're thinking about building more holistic, community-focused neighborhoods. And developing partnerships with regional transit agencies to improve regional connectivity. A lot of times, if you have to drive to Seattle to work, it doesn't matter how much mass transit Tacoma has. We need to be thinking more of taking a regional approach to implementing some of these ideas. I can go on and on, but I'll stop there and let somebody else.
I think that is so important to Tacoma, because if you think about how many people have been forced to move outside of Tacoma and make choices about their living based on the cost of housing, and then they also can't get to their jobs. And one of the things that we need to do is have that transit-oriented development and that connectedness, because if the job is in Frederickson, or if the job is like way out, like you can't be somewhere where there's not a bus route to get there and then say, well, I want people to like increase their economic mobility. Like you have to make it possible for them. So I think that's like a really important, tangible thing we can do. Christy, what are your thoughts?
Oh man, just listening to you talk, like it's expensive to be poor. It's
Yes.
like,
Yes.
you got to move further away. Now you're forced. I mean, I feel very privileged. I have great access to daycare, but if I didn't, like I would need to drive because I would need to have access to my kids, and it just compounds everything. Man, I'm trying really hard to bring the solutions to the panel,
No,
but
I
it's complicated stuff.
So one of my favorite guests made a comment about that like it either costs you time or it costs you money.
Mhm.
If you don't have resources, it costs you your time or it costs you your money. So either way, poor people are paying double, because if you can't afford to have a car, then you're sitting at a bus stop waiting, and that's time, and if you can't afford to wait at the bus stop because your job won't allow you to, then you're paying more money on a car. So your net deficit is a deficit, right?
Mhm.
And so I think like that's such an important part of that tension that we've got to like, I think it's James Baldwin said that not everything can be faced, but nothing that needs to be addressed can.
Mhm.
I messed it up. Okay. You know what I'm saying? The quote, it's a very important quote. It's very poignant. He just says it beautifully, but we have to start just having the difficult conversations and just accepting that tension is going to be there, and go into the conversation knowing that tension is going to be there.
Can I just jump in as a government agency? That's why stakeholder process is so important. Like if you want to go far, go together. And that means as tough as the conversations are, getting in there and listening to the communities who are most impacted and doing that co-creation of solutions. Like you just can't, like you're just never going to get a solution that sticks if you're not involving the people who need it the most.
Yeah. iLeana, do you want to talk about some of the policies or, conversations you feel like need to start happening right now?
Absolutely. Definitely from the Tacoma Climate Leadership Cohort, I learned that I want to say it right, the City of Tacoma Climate Change Action Plan was created and demanded by our Native Nation and young people in 2019. As the city, let's create a plan to really think about climate change seriously. The plan is already there. It has so many actions that needs the proper budget. So the first thing that we need to do is that city staff members, council members need the community. So we need to lower the barriers for community to come to the table and then share their lived experience with these issues. Because I will say that if you are not at the table, you're at the menu. I also learned that a quarter of Washingtonians don't drive. So can we center that voice in order to create solution on how can we be sustainable and create transportation, how they are doing, what barriers they are having. If they're not at the table, we'll just be missing out on solutions that they already have been thinking. So I think that the conversation is, well, Tacoma has unequitable access to opportunity. Tacoma is segregated. Tacoma is missing out people of color at the table. We have a lower equity index in South Tacoma and East Tacoma. So I think that can we prioritize opportunities and development there? Because we already prioritize development and opportunities in other parts of Tacoma, and they're doing pretty well. So now can we look at equitable ways to bring new things to the city? That's a conversation that we have to constantly have. And that requires time, that requires healing. And then to be quite honest, we have to honor the Puyallup Nation tribe. They demanded a plan, and they are the original owners of this. So I just really want to focus on that plan in every single step and make sure that the city is prioritizing that and don't deviate from that. So can we ask our council members to just kind of prioritize that? Because they are the decision making at the end.
Yeah.
So those are kind of the conversations that I would like to have.
So someone online just mentioned, like, how do you do that with a community? Because a lot of times the people we need to come to the table have the least amount of time and the least amount of resources. So as a political agency, do we start to incentivize that? Do we start to pay people for their time? Like, what are the ways? I mean, that is it's almost a Pandora's box, right? I can hear as a strategist, I can hear the different arguments. Well, everybody's time is valuable, and why did you pay some people and not other people? But if you really want to get the people at the table who are most affected by this, like, what are some thoughts on that?
I can start. So the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency just completed their strategic plan. Check it out. There's entire objectives around diesel exhaust emission and transportation. But as part of it, it was a very active community solicitation across the 4 counties that we serve. And we did compensate people to be part of I'm recognizing some faces that were there to give input into the process. And I'm proud that we were able to compensate folks and that it was such an inclusive process. But I think every time you reach one plateau, like, there's more to go. And that unlocked opportunities for us to see that we were able to pay people to be included into our process. And I am very proud of that. But how can we also change that process so that it's more culturally inclusive, that we're not just inviting people into a pre-existing way of the way things have always been, but rather than trying to get them to come to our table, going to their table and then moving the table in the direction we want. So more lessons to go.
Yeah. Evlondo?
Oops, pardon me. Yeah, I think this is the kind of brick and mortar of building community engagement. And it's something that, it's not just Tacoma, the entire country, right, is suffering from this kind of, I don't want to say apathy in a sense, but like a lot of people are kind of checked out of the process. And I think one of the benefits of Tacoma is that when I first moved here, this community is very engaged in its civic life. There's definitely not equitable access to everything, but there's a general awareness anecdotally and an engagement. And so I think we need to build on that. When I first moved here, Chrissy reached out to me and kind of gave me the lay of the land as far as the environmental. And I had other friends that I've made that encouraged me to go out to be a member of the STC, which is a body that anyone in the city could apply for, to be a part of kind of the decision-making process and knowing what's going on and sharing with people around them. The Tacoma Climate Cohort, when they did the climate action plan, there was a concerted outreach to environmental justice stakeholders who were, I believe, offered compensation for their time. So you're right. I think we have to think very radically about how we approach communities who don't have the resources and time to be as civically active and engaged as they might want to be. But, whether it takes, sustained community outreach door to door in the neighborhood councils, there are a lot of kind of smaller bodies that could be activated to pull more people into the process. And I think the city has done a pretty good job of creating that space to do that. And now we need to reach out and actually make sure that people are aware of those opportunities and have the time and resources to participate.
Yeah.
I have to tap into mentorship. I had a friend who is an ally, well-connected, hear me out about my intention on coming out of the pandemic to give back to the community. And then they offer me a connection to the Tacoma Tree Foundation. The Tacoma Tree Foundation lead the Tacoma Climate Leadership Cohort, which was paid to learn about civic engagement. And I think that we need to pay people for their time and for their expertise. We cannot assume that they have all the time, all the resources to go out there and try to build their city. So I think that we have to switch into recognizing that people times is valuable and their experience is valuable. And then mentorship, I couldn't be in this table if somebody was not hearing me out, if somebody was not opening up the opportunities.
Yeah.
So I think that we need to go to the communities, who is doing the work, empower them, and people will come because there is some sort of like a trust. I trust my friend, then I get to this opportunity. And right now I'm just like learning to be more involved in the city. And it's hard, it's vulnerable. You have to be here.
Right.
But I think that it takes that one-on-one, voice-to-voice, community conversation.
Yeah.
So in that sense,
And I think that is one of the spaces in environmental justice and just environmental sustainability that we should be really more intentional about. And one of the reasons I appreciate Downtown on the Go and keep coming back to this, because it's really complicated. And that goes beyond socioeconomics or education level. Like, it's really complicated stuff. And if you don't have safe spaces where you can say, I don't know what O2 emissions are, I don't understand why this is happening. Like, you might have a feeling like, I know things aren't quite right in my neighborhood, but I don't know how to scientifically tell you what that means. And so then I don't want to go to the meeting, or I don't want to go testify at City Hall, or I don't want to go to Pierce County and ask for something because I don't have the right language. I don't have the right understanding. And it's super intimidating. And it's a space where there could be a lot of information that feels like it's conflicting. Some things seem really simple and easy. And then when you talk to like the planners and the scientists, you're like, oh, okay, I thought I knew a thing, but I didn't know a thing. And then sometimes it really is just as simple as like, I live in a community, I don't have a bike lane or a sidewalk. So, and you didn't give me a bus route. So how am I supposed to get there? And that's pretty straightforward. Now, the solution to it is not. But we don't stay in communication and conversation long enough to really understand both sides of it. And as someone who's like worked for the city and understands how complex some of the things that community thinks are like a quick, easy fix, and I'm sure, Chrissy, you felt that at TPU too. It's like, it's really not. There's all these other rules and regulations we have on us that don't allow us just to do a thing quickly, but we don't stay in conversation long enough.
Can I tell a story?
Yeah.
So I ran Tacoma Green Drinks for 14 years, and shout out to Downtown on the Go for having the biggest green drinks ever with the drink and link. That was amazing. And also shout out to Communities for Healthy Bay for continuing to run it. But the whole idea of green drinks, yes, I'm Irish and I love to drink, but also it's one of the taglines is environmentalists don't get invited to parties. And the other tagline is, invite your friends, because they might not see themselves in the environmental movement. They can see themselves in a bar. And the whole idea was to reach people where they're at, build that trust, get people just talking and connected, because to iLeana's point, it's that one-to-one, you got to have a relationship with someone. Like, so many people in this room have come to testify in front of city council because somebody invited them, not because you were just scanning the agendas because it was something fun to do. So if we're going to make these solutions, it really is just so important to keep that community central and to remember why we're doing this. Yeah, that's my main point.
Yeah, no. So do either of you have anything to add to that? The green drinks. Come to green drink. No, like I said, I think it's just a really interesting, space where people feel very strongly about it. And it can be very intimidating if you're new to the conversation, or if you don't have the background, or if you already feel like you haven't been heard on the things that right? Like as a woman of color, like I have extensive knowledge on like systemic, oppression. And if you won't listen to me on that, and I've got all the cards to say, I know that, why would you listen to me on how to protect whales out in Commencement Bay? Because I don't have no degrees or anything that would tell you that I know anything about that. Luckily, I've sat at this table long enough that I've had lots of interesting conversations about it that have helped me know even where to go research and learn more. But it really is a pretty intimidating space and I have to say, I feel like we're in good hands, because young people, for some reason, they've been on it from the beginning, and they are trying to speak truth to power, and we're not always making good spaces for them to be able to do that either. So, Chrissy, shout out to you. Thanks for green drinks. So the climate action plan, and I don't know if anyone can answer this, but I'm going to put it towards you, Evlondo, since you're on the commission. The climate action plan called for citywide no idling ordinance. Even such a tiny step has never been implemented. We don't even ask parents to stop blowing car fumes in children's faces. All our plans do nothing if it's only talk. How do we put some of these plans into measurable actions?
Wow, I just solved the world's problems right there.
That's why we invited you. That was in the small print at the bottom of that.
I appreciate the question because, as somebody that's worked in the environmental space, I want things to happen now too. And I don't have much truck for politicians making excuses or, why these industries allowed to just pollute with impunity. We can have all the beautiful plans in the world, but if they're not put in action, then what good are they? But I will say, if you look at the climate action process, right, it started with the youth of Tacoma, among other environmental groups, demanding a climate emergency.
Mm-hmm.
And the city declared a climate emergency. And they're like, okay, you've been sitting in this emergency for a while. You haven't done anything yet. All right, we need a plan. So the city sorry, my apologies. We need a plan to actually put this into action. And we have a good plan. And now we need to fund that plan. And a lot of the work we've been doing on STC in ways that people can be involved directly is helping us prioritize which of those climate proposals are the most important and calling on the council to fund those and put those into action. A lot of this stuff takes a lot of money. It takes a lot of money. So we need to make sure that the council knows what the priorities are. They have the positions available at the city level to go after those funds. Like the Inflation Reduction Act has a lot of money out there, but we need the people with the expertise that knows how to win those grants and then come back and implement, the grant based upon what the money is funded for. So like you said, it's really complicated, but the more voices that we can hear in this process, the more people are able to tell what they want and what they need in their communities and speak to their experiences. I think we can build a movement that actually gets a lot of these things done.
Yeah. I also think we don't need to wait all the time for ordinances. Like if I own a business, I can put signs in my parking lot that says, please no idling. It's bad for the universe. Now, some people are going to do it, but some people don't even think about it. Like I'm the type of person that like, I don't see it, but they're at Urban Waters. And every time I'd go to Urban Waters, I'd be sitting in my car because I'm always supposed to be 3 places all the time. And so I'm like calling the place that I'm supposed to be right now. And the car's running and I'm not even thinking about it because I'm doing other things. And I look up and that sign is like, this is a no idle zone. And I'm like, okay, shoot. Okay. Turn off the car. All right. Take it off speaker, And so I think there is a part of this that we just need to be more assertive about talking about it, in the spaces that we are and not waiting on someone else to tell us we need to do a thing, but actually just saying, why not PTAs talking about that? I'm thinking about as a school district, I can go back and now say, hey, why don't we put those signs up in our parking lot? I don't know if there's a reason why we do or don't, but we could, but we all have opportunities for little things like that is the cool part about sustainability. Like little things do matter. and in bigger ways. And we could all just do little things too. So
Thank you for saying that. I realized I didn't even answer the question because it showed like idling isn't something I'm very familiar with as far as, I don't notice it a lot. So thank you for addressing the specific answer to that question. Because I went kind of all over the world.
no, that's, I mean, it's good. I mean, like, but I think there's probably 100 of those that we don't think about. I have a friend who's like super against trash. And like, so she minimizes her stuff. She goes to the grocery store and she has all these little bags that she puts her food in. And I'm like, I can't take that on. Like, that was beautiful. But the other day I was in a store and I saw some stuff that like would help her to do it better. And so her next birthday present, hope she's not watching today, will be all products that will help her be more sustainable because she has the capacity for that. I don't have the capacity for that, but I do have the capacity to stop idling, and so I think it's like, maybe one day I'll get to the point where I want to wash all the hand cloths in my house. I had 3 kids that are athletes, and so I hate laundry. So I will not be creating any more laundry at my house. That's my sustainability. But iLeana or Chrissy, what do you think about like some of those things that are just practical things people can do?
Well, I read the plan twice. So many good things there. One of the ones that resonates for me, it's 9 spots in Tacoma where we can create productive food and local food that is for the residents. So for me, it's like, oh, what a great way to get involved in this plan. Where are those productive places when we can have local, healthy food in Tacoma?
Mm-hmm.
There is also a plan on green, sustainable, well-paying jobs in case that you're interested in industry. There is also aspects on affordable housing, zoning. How can we think about there is climate change is going to be a migration of people from hotter spaces coming to good climes like here in Washington. So we are going to start seeing that. So how the zoning is helping us to accommodate more and more people who actually are displaced by climate change. So there is so many aspects in this plan that anyone in Tacoma can be interested in one.
Right.
And then we have 2 deadlines, 2030 and 2050. So you can think about where as an individual can I be part of it, where I can have fun, when I can get engaged in my community, when I can learn. That as an individual, as a community is like, can we support this that is already been done, right? And as a systemic way is like, well, who is making decisions that can support this plan? So I think that there is so much there that I am sure that you're going to find something that you will have capacity, you will be excited about it, and it will make a difference.
Yeah, that's great.
I have something, not individual actions,
Okay.
but playing off what you said with all this Inflation Reduction Act funding coming. I feel like we need to talk about that because it's the largest investment in climate change ever. And on March 1st, the Climate Pollution Reduction Act funding was announced, and $1 million is coming to this metropolitan statistical area to do more planning around climate change. And I was talking to my good friend, Chrissy Lynette, and I hope I don't put you out there, but she was like, enough planning, let's do something. And I think that's such a good point, that this region is at such an advantage with both TPU, Pierce County, Tacoma. The ports have a climate action plan. They just need consolidated and implemented. And what is it? What's that other famous quote? I'm going to botch it now. Planning is everything. Plans are useless. Like,
Right.
We did the work. We've made the communities. We figured out what we needed to do. Now we just need to do it.
Yeah. Another shout out to Christy, not just because she's in the audience, but honestly was the first person to be like, hey, when you're writing a strategic plan for the city, I want to talk to you about how it aligns with this. And every opportunity she gets to say, oh, you could just do this a little bit better and it would be good for the climate, she does. And people like that need to be in every organization. People, again, it's how we use our collective power to bring these things forward. So I have a question about, this goes back to the conversation we were having about community. And this person says, a nonprofit I work for successfully advocated for shifting recreation investments to less affluent and more diverse areas of Pierce County that often lack things like parks, trails. However, due to the tight timeframe, we didn't do outreach to those communities. Relationship building requires time to build trust. So we need to work on that now before future opportunities come up. What can nonprofits, particularly predominantly white ones, do to help center other voices in the community? I mean, I think the fact that you acknowledge it is we're like the fact that people don't have to come and yell at you and tell you that you need to do it is like we've already started way ahead of the curve. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I can speak to something I've heard from environmental and climate justice groups. A lot of times, I call them legacy environmental groups, like these nonprofits that have a lot of resources. They want to know how they can help. Share the resources. A lot of times, if you go into a community, there's already a group that are working on the issue that you want to come, that you see a need for. They just don't have the visibility or the resources. So resource sharing, expertise sharing, making space for that group to continue to work while you help them as much as you can in the background is, to me, one of the key ways that not only you can center marginalized voices, but also help those groups become viable and important groups in their own right. So that's one suggestion I have.
Yeah, it's great. Ileana?
I can talk about the Latinx community because that's where I represent here in this table. Only 1.8% of philanthropic money goes to nonprofits that are Latinx. So how can we release funding for all of these nonprofits, which in general have missions that are very big, very ambitious, and requires constant funding? So I think that we need to think about how equitable is the money going into the nonprofit, because nonprofit do most of the work in our community. So they are extremely important. And getting funding is extremely difficult. So we need to kind of think more equitable on building capacity. And we can put a price on empowering communities. That takes time. That doesn't have a price, and we need to be okay with that. If we need to fund you to build capacity, to develop your knowledge about how the nonprofit work, this should be a way to fund that until they establish a foundation that can start kind of running that pipeline of grant. So I think that, think about that. For me, that number is very important. Okay, the Latinx community is working with very little resources. How can we adjust on that? And I think that we need sponsors. We need people who can tell us about how, if they are really successful, if they have so many years running a nonprofit, share that knowledge, how they got there, and eventually kind of change that disparity. And there is other like people of color as well. I don't know what is the statistics there, but I'm sure that is pretty similar.
Yeah, for sure. So there's a question about electrification of vehicles, charging and parking for EVs. I understand that the federal tax refund incentives of $7,500 EV purchase is expiring at the end of the month. Well, I don't know, nobody here can answer this question. And I know that because I used to work at the city, but will Tacoma pick up the relay baton on EV incentives? And if so, what's the timeline? Not necessarily asking you to answer for the city because you can't, but have you heard of any plans for anything locally to happen to extend that, or do you know for sure if that?
Not talking about the city,
Yeah.
but there are incentive dollars in the Inflation Reduction Act that no one quite knows what's going to happen with. It's either going through utilities or commerce, but they're coming. TBD, check back in a few months.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Do any of you have a sense of how unjust immigration policies intersect with climate, like the climate refugees that migrate here? Are we responding with appropriate changes to immigration policy and or climate asylum policies? I don't know anything about this space, so I cannot ad-lib to give you more time.
That's a really interesting question. I think we are all migrants. United States is a country where it's funded by many type of migrants, but at one point we just lower the barriers for certain type of migrants. And we have to kind of think about how can we think about the migrant policy now with a new equitable lenses. It has not been changed for a long time, and we need to think about the different type of people that makes this state extremely productive and exciting. I moved from a state where the representation of diversity was really low, and that was Montana, and I was looking for a more diverse state as Washington. So I think that there is an asset there. It's a hard conversation though, but think about it right now, we are having so many people migrating for very, very violent, unsafe places. So we need to think about that. And we cannot really do it for everyone, but perhaps we can review and continue to honoring that what makes United States extremely exciting. It's the migration and the diversity, and that's our strength. So we need to just kind of revisit that conversation with kindness and time, and centering those who are in a very unprivileged situation. They cannot access so many things, and they are still supporting the economy of the state in one way or another.
Yeah.
So I think that is a hard conversation, but we
Absolutely.
have to kind of like revisit that.
Yeah.
Okay, you go.
Go ahead.
Just briefly piggybacking, I think I agree. Answering based on what my day job is, I know for a fact that this is going to become an increasingly intense issue. We have a brutal immigration policy already, coupled with kind of a brutal foreign policy and climate change that is forcing migrants from the Southern Hemisphere to come to the United States. Already farms are failing, deforestation, violence, more violence over limited resources. That's a problem we're going to have to confront in the immediate future, especially as people who are former climate deniers want to enact policies when they realize that climate change is happening, that are going
There
to
was a
keep out.
tornado in California.
Exactly. Yes.
That's a problem.
And they're going to turn that ire on people who are migrating from other places that have been harmed by climate change. Internally, I saw this in the New York Times style section that climate migration is a fad right now, where you have people moving to different states and different small towns, causing all the problems, people of means, I should say, with gentrification and increasing prices and affordable housing. So I think now is the time for a city like Tacoma, which has already experienced some of these effects, to really think, like you were saying, about how we can make sure that we have equitable sustainability solutions in place that protect the people that already live here, because inevitably it is going to happen where people are going to we're going to have our own climate impacts, but compared to other places in the country, there may be less harmful than you would be somewhere else. So climate migration, internal immigration is going to be a problem we need to confront in the near and long-term future.
Absolutely. Chrissy, I'm going to let you have the last word, and then I'm going to wrap up and hand to Laura because she's giving me the look.
I just want to say I'm really inspired by the work coming out of La Resistencia and Communities for Healthy Bay, where they noticed in the detention center down in the tide flats that there is increased respiratory problems. And they realize it has to do with the tide flats, and it's there. That's horrible. Those people are being held there. And also that area is also being breathed by people who live on Tacoma's east side. So now it's translating into a really wonderful joint program between these two organizations to go boots on ground in those neighborhoods and connect these issues that don't seem connected on its face, but help bring a depth of understanding to our community in general. And I just think that's fantastic work.
Yeah, well, this has been an amazing conversation. So the question, and again, I didn't ask it because I don't think that they can answer it, but I will ask them. What are the transportation plans and mobility issues around the bridge industrial? Oh, what are going to be the What are you all going to do about the environmental and racist disaster of the proposed mega warehouse for Tacoma?
Oh,
Who wants to take it first?
I mean, the STC has written, I think 1 or 2 letters against the proposed warehouse for all the environmental justice reasons that I'm sure you're well aware of. As a fact, there's a little flyer up here. I can even just
She brought
Okay.
that. She brought.
so it's so yeah, I mean, as far as STC, and I think again, we're talking about mobilizing community support for that, but you know, I think you've been doing a great job of raising awareness of that, and the more awareness we can raise, the better.
Chrissy.
Along that same line is the first industrial. That's why we're bringing this up here. Plans for the future.
Puget Sound Clean Air Agency also wrote a letter as part, Puget Sound Clean Air Agency also wrote a letter as part of the planning process, and we've been involved in doing some of the modeling around the transportation sector.
Yeah, it's very concerning. We have one member of the Tacoma Climate Leadership Cohort raising the issue that these warehouses are going into places where is less trees and we are creating more carbon dioxide, and there is no plan to at least create some solutions, creating more pavement. In South Tacoma already have increased temperature during the summer days for the lack of canopy. So there is so many concerns here. So I think that definitely we need to create advocacy to understand that all of these have long-term consequences for younger generation.
Yeah, you're welcome. No, I appreciate that. I think there's, again, this is one of those spaces where, like everything we've talked about today, we need to create time and space to have full conversations about it, because there's so many complexities and layers to all of these things that really can't just be solved by like, do it, don't do it. It's like, do it and, or don't do it and, or there are needs and things that are just at odds with each other that I think, you know, the reason that I keep coming back to do these conversations is because I honestly believe that communication is at the root of all this, like true engagement, you know, not coming in. Our society has become so polarized where you can't even have conversations. It's like, as soon as you don't agree, that's the end of the conversation. And we've got to get back to having full conversations where all the voices are heard, where everybody can walk away with maybe 40% of what they wanted and feel good about it, because nobody's getting 100% of what they want. And so how do we go in with open hearts, open minds, you know, really good intentions, and try to get to a space where we can all leave and feel heard, validated, and be okay with the outcome. So thank you for another great Friday Forum, another great series. And Laura.
Yeah, thank you to all of our panelists and to Tanisha. I think that was a great note to end on. And I think we did the best we've ever done with answering all of the questions that come in, because folks always have such excellent questions during these conversations. So thank you so much. And again, I want to give a huge shout out to Tanisha. She really brings these forums together and does such an incredible job moderating. And we're so glad that you still do this with us.
I will.
I want to let y'all know about a couple upcoming events. So I don't have all the details to share with you yet, but we are planning kind of a Friday Forums happy hour sort of thing. Yeah, still getting all the details, but it's going to be on Thursday, April 13th. So you can come hang out, talk with other folks who are interested in housing, transportation, climate, all that stuff. Yes, and drink if that's your thing. And yeah, so more details on that to come. And also Downtown on the Go will be starting our 2023 Walk Tacoma series in April. The first one will be Wednesday, April 12th. Oh, those are right next to each other. Love it. So more information on our website, which is downtownonthego.org. A recording of this forum is going to be available on social media. If you feel like sharing it out to folks who couldn't be here, we'd love that. And yeah, I think that's it. So thank you again for attending. Thank you to our panelists, and thank you everyone for a really excellent forum series this year.